Today, we'll be looking at my prototype for the Hogwarts Greenhouses. I'll give you the full tour, and I'll go over the building techniques that I used, and I'll show you how I actually was able to design the thing. So, let's get started. Personally, when I approach a MOC that is modeled after an actual building that could have reference photos, like the Hogwarts Greenhouses, or any part of Hogwarts for that matter, the first thing I'll do is I like to check the reference photos, which if you don't know what the greenhouses actually look like, I'll try and put a photo up on screen. I like to look for key design elements and try to at least include those before I start adding in any of the finer details, because I don't always know what has to be excluded in the design process when these buildings get scaled down so much. So the first few elements that I noticed are these white columns here. Every window panel is separated by these long white columns, and they continue up through the roof. So it was really important to me to be able to include that. I also noticed that the building seems to be separated into segments that are divided by these columns, and I wanted to make sure that I had clear dividing segments like that. So what I've basically done is on the other side of these tiles is just a whole lot of snot bricks. And I can take these off here, maybe, so that you can see. These are all just snot bricks. Even down here at the bottom is more snot bricks. So this entire building is basically built with 1x2 snot bricks stacked on top of each other and next to each other. And when I was building it, it's actually fairly wobbly until you get up to the roof line. And only then was I able to connect plates and start layering pieces in order to secure the walls so they weren't so wobbly. But most of this is done with snot bricks and window panes. So everywhere you see these tiles here is snot bricks. Now this was really important to me because I built a first draft of this, which you did not see. And the entire facade looked very flat and plain, and I wanted to give it more texture and detail so that when you look down the side, you can see how those tiles really enhance the profile view of it and make it just a little bit more interesting and appealing to look at. You might also know from my other Hogwarts builds is that I'm very against and anti these pre-molded window pieces because I feel like they really restrict my creativity. And I had thought about doing this in the same fashion as my other windows and using 1x1 transclear plates, basically layered on top of each other and then sandwiched in between the pillars. And while I think that would have worked, I started thinking that the entire purpose of a greenhouse is to let as much light in as possible. And so part of the drawback of using that technique is the 1x1 transclear plates create almost a stained glass or frosted window effect, and I didn't like it for letting light in, and so I opted to go with just the window panels because these transclear window glass pieces that you see here are a little bit more see-through, and once this is full of plants, I want to be able to look into these greenhouses from a good distance away and be able to see what's happening inside. So that's why I elected to go with the windows instead of my normal technique of 1x1 transclear plates. These door frames are actually the 6-stud wide window frames that have been out for a while, but I selected them because of the new piece that came out, I believe this year in 2022, is for the double doors. And I'll be able to install double doors in these, which I don't currently have because the piece I need doesn't exist yet. I want to do trans clear double doors, and right now they only come in trans light blue and a few other strange colors. But it seems LEGO's really been pushing that piece, so I'm going in with the assumption that at some time next year they will make those door pieces and I can include them. So for now I just have open doorways, and those will change to trans clear double doors once the piece exists and is available. Looking in on the inside, I elected to go for tan arches, just to kind of break up the white. I feel like there's a lot of white, even still to this point. And that may be one of the things that I change first, is I may integrate a few tan parts just to help break up the monotony of the white and kind of give it an aged sort of look. But I still haven't fully decided on that yet, and that's still very much up for debate. One thing I did learn about these greenhouses is that even though there's 9 greenhouses, but 8 of them are of this scale and build. The 9th one is kind of like a little lean-to that's up against the castle, and that's actually where we see the Mandrake scene from Chamber of Secrets. And I'll prototype that later, but the other 8 are of this size and scale, but they are not all identical. So what they actually did is, see these 2 doors here, and then I have a door on either end on these sides. The door positioning changes depending on where this greenhouse is located. So sometimes it'll have these 4 doors that you see here, along with 2 more on the back side in the same places. Sometimes it'll only have doors on one side like I currently have, and sometimes they have no doors on the end. So the door placement changes from greenhouse to greenhouse, but the great thing about this technique is that since I've built it in these panels, is that I can always, take the window panels out and just put the door frame parts in. And it's very customizable and modular in that sense, to where I can change the placement and positioning of the doors and then just add some stairs heading up into it like you see there. And then that way I can use the same design for all the greenhouses, even though they are different. Moving up here to the roof. The roof is actually the most difficult part of this build because of all the very strange angles that it occurs on. And so I elected to go with these corner beams here to give us the angle of the roof. And they look pretty good from a distance, I think. I actually borrowed the technique for these from Bricks Unbound. He did a video about his greenhouses a couple years ago, and I watched that. And I thought this was a very good idea, so I borrowed that technique. And since I was using windows down here, I wanted to continue the same effect all the way up on the roof. And so actually how the roof is built, I can show you. These pieces aren't really connected. They just set in here. These are panel pieces right here. And so the window can actually catch on this lip right here, and then it just rests along these arches and up against this row of bricks that I've added. But basically with all the arches inside, I have just made a beam, a center beam with white bricks that I attached all these window pieces to and continued the white columns all the way up to the top. And then these are just more of the windows, smaller than the windows on the side here. But it's just more of these windows connected with more snot bricks and on a plate. And then I just laid them out like was necessary. And then it just slots right in there. And then you kind of have to scoot things over to get things to line up correctly with the pillars to get that continuous look. For the very top, to cap it off, I've just used these TransClear cheese slopes offset with white ones. And then on top of this beam, I just put a row of white tiles. This was the closest that I was able to get to the reference photos for this because, like I said, this roof, it gave me a lot of challenges. I built this entire building in like a day, and then I spent another week working on how I would accomplish the roof and getting it right. And the end is very much the same. It's just more of these windows held in by these panels, which create a lip, and just free resting up against those. But it's still pretty sturdy. Like I can tap on it and put a lot of pressure and they don't fall in. So I think it's going to hold well enough. The unfortunate thing is it does leave this gap along the corners where this beam is on both sides actually. And you can see I tried to fill it in as best I could with some more TransClear bricks. But when you get up really close and look at it, it kind of looks funny, but from a distance, which will be, if you're viewing this from my setup, which you'll be standing 2, 3, 4 feet away, it's going to look just fine. You're not going to notice the gap so much. And if anyone says anything, I'll claim that it's venting or something for the greenhouse. And I'll probably have, maybe work it in a little bit more and have like some plant vines growing up out of it once I actually fill this with plants. But for now, the main goal was just to prototype the building, not necessarily so much the interiors, because all the interiors will be different with different plant selections and things like that. Up here, I used one of these 1x2 slopes that curves inwards. It's kind of concave, just to cap off the ends to kind of give it the illusion that the roof is still sloping inwards like this. And here I was playing around with some cheese slopes, just trying to fill in some gaps, but I think I'll probably end up removing those. Steps are just a basic 1x6 plates covered with tiles. I tried to replicate the ones from the photo as best as possible. Everything is very white, and it stands out a little bit too much right now, and so, like I said, I may integrate some tan just to break it up a little bit, but we'll see how it looks up against the castle, and once I actually have a whole fleet of these things, because my goodness, there's going to be so many of these. And one of the other reasons for prototyping this was so that I could get a part list, and I could start looking for the parts that I would need to complete this. So now let's start talking about some things that I don't like about this. Going back to the reference photo, you'll notice that the white at the bottom should be thicker than the white at the top above the windows. And mine doesn't do that. Mine is pretty much equal distance on both areas. And so I'm going to be looking for ways to change that and hopefully shrink down some of this white space up here along the top edge, just to give it a more accurate look. I don't know that it really matters. I don't think your average person is going to realize that, but for me, accuracy is king. And so I really want to try and mimic it as best as possible. The other thing is you'll notice that like every other one of these is still has studs, and the other ones I've tiled off. And the reason is because these greenhouses have like a dragon/snake mixture gargoyle that rests on top. And I haven't designed those yet. I'm still working out some ideas. And by the way, if you know how to do those, leave me a comment down below, because I'm struggling with those gargoyles. They're very complicated, more so than they should be, but I'm still working out the design for that, and that's why I don't have anything there, but there will be 4 on each side of the roof, on the back and the front. And I just left those off to remind me that, hey, I need to put a gargoyle on those. I was lucky enough to find a bunch of the 2x2 glass pieces for these smaller windows on the pick-a-brick wall. And so I bought a couple cups of them. So I should have enough of those to last me for all the greenhouses. But I do still need to acquire all the other pieces that I need. And it's going to take me some time. The actual plan is to put this on the back burner now that it's prototyped, because this is actually not the next section of castle that I'll be working on. I'm still working on finishing the Great Hall. And then after that, I'll be moving to a different section before I come back to these greenhouses. But now that I know how it's built, I can be on the lookout for parts from Pick-a-Brick or acquiring them from wherever I need to, and hopefully reduce the cost of all these greenhouses. This building's actually pretty big. You can see this is on 2 32x32 base plates, and it takes up almost the full width or length, however you want to refer to that. It's 12 studs wide. And then the length, not including the steps, I believe is 55 studs long. I remember it being an odd number, and that was concerning as well. But because Lego typically doesn't work well in odd numbers. So it's a pretty sizable building, and to think that there's going to be 8 of these is just crazy. And it just goes to show how big this castle is going to be once I actually get it built. Now, this greenhouse actually is scaled perfectly with my existing build of the Great Hall and the courtyard and the entrance hall. And the reason I know that is because I actually have the blueprints from the set designers on Half-Blood Prints when they built their full-scale micro model castle that they used for the main overhead shots of the castle and things like that. I have the actual blueprints that they used to build that. And so what I was able to do is I was able to measure the dimensions of the greenhouses that they have set up, and then compare that to the dimensions for the entrance courtyard and Great Hall, and then do like a stud conversion based off of, okay, I know my courtyard is this width, and then I can convert it to studs. And that's how I was able to go ahead and build a part of the castle that's not directly next to the portion that I am currently working on. Up until I got those a few weeks ago, I actually thought I was going to have to build the castle kind of almost in sequential order with the buildings next to each other and work my way across just so I could scale it properly. But now that I have the blueprints, I can actually see the dimensions for any portion of the castle, and it will allow me to skip around, basically. And so while I'm waiting on parts for the Great Hall, it allowed me to build something totally different, and I needed to build something that was not tan, because I'm trying my best to conserve tan parts, because I need them for the Great Hall. I didn't want to exhaust my supply, and I noticed the greenhouses were white, and so that let me get started on these. I encourage you to click on this video right here if you want to see the progress up to this point on the Hogwarts Castle MOC. You can see the Great Hall, Entrance Hall, all that good stuff. Let me know what you think about this build in the comments down below, and until next week, I will see you guys later. Bye.